Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong. I have former CIA analyst and geopolitical commentator and analyst Larry Johnson and former chief of staff for Colin Powell, retired Army Colonel, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, glad we're still alive.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to get to in the latest on the Iran war updates. So everyone hit the like button as we get started here right away. So first, I just wanted to get to the latest developments when it comes to the F-35 that was shot down over Iranian airspace. I just wanted to play first, just hours before the report that the F-35 was shot down. Donald Trump said this, which contrasts quite heavily with the reality of the situation. But here we go.
There, just about everything there is to obliterate, including leadership. The Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft equipment is gone. We're flying wherever we want, Pete. We have nobody even shooting at us.
So there was that commentary by Donald Trump. And then suddenly, here's the ABC News report on the F-35 being shot down just hours after Donald Trump made that pronouncement.
For the first time in this war, an F-35 stealth fighter jet was struck during a combat mission over Iran. The pilot made an emergency landing at a US base in the region and is now in a stable condition. But there are serious questions over how a stealth plane, nearly invisible to radar and costing roughly $100 million, could have been hit after 3 weeks of relentless bombardment of the Iranian military. Overnight, Israel and Iran trading yet more attacks.
So
President Trump originally denied
I just wanted to play that to begin. That was how they framed it, Larry and Colonel Wilkerson. But there are reports and there's more evidence that possibly not only did Iran take this down, but that it was not necessarily a very, how should I say, a smooth landing for the F-35, and that they may actually, according to some reports, there are shrapnel injuries that were experienced, and that this there was a Chinook that was essentially circling the Saudi desert, possibly looking for the F-35 that had crashed. So, Larry, what do you know about this situation? What does it tell you? And maybe where you think this war is now as we're getting close to the third week.
Well, I have to go Sergeant Schultz on you. I know nothing. Okay. Look, I've seen the reports from the Iranian side. I've seen the denials from the U.S. side, or the U.S. admitted that it crashed, that it landed. I think if it got hit full on with a missile, it would have come apart. It wouldn't have stayed intact. But how do we know if it landed? Because we've got a clear track record of Central Command lying. They lied about the KC-135 that was shot down. That was shot down. But they claimed it was a mid-air collision. So they lied about that. They lied about the KC-135s that were on the ground at Prince Sultan Air Base, claiming that only 4 suffered minor damage. No, they suffered significant damage. They're no longer mission capable. So, but is it conceivable that Iran still has an active air defense system? Yeah. And, I'm not sure what hit the plane or how it hit it. But if it was able to fly away and land, then, it didn't, whatever hit it didn't cause a catastrophic destruction.
Yeah, Colonel Wilkerson, what do you make of this development, and what does it tell you about where this war is now?
I'm like Larry. I have no insight into whether it happened or how it happened or what the disposition of the airplane is. I can tell you this, though. We were shocked. I happened to be the first Marine Corps War College seminar, probably the first seminar ever, after we had that great book. I forget the name of the author. I shouldn't, because he's a terrific guy. I had him come to my seminar and speak. Outed the NSA. They had to make a decision after he wrote that book and outed so much of their covert situation, along with the NRO, that they opened up. And I had petitioned them for years before, as had my successor, or my predecessor, and they wouldn't let us visit. We visited almost everything else in the government hierarchy except the NSA and the NRO. Well, about the same time, they both opened up and they let us visit. So we took a seminar in, had to go through God knows security clearances and everything else, even though all of my Marines and airmen and such had TS or higher, code word, special compartmented, those sorts of things. And when we got in there at the most propitious time to learn something that the NSA had just learned. And I don't think the rest of the community, the security community, had learned yet. They would subsequently learn, and all manner of lies would come out of that community. But I think we got the truth in that briefing in the NSA. And what we heard was that these dumb Serbs on the ground had figured out that they could find an old radar, World War II vintage radar. And if they were really careful in looking at the sweeps of that radar, they could find a little blip on that radar that was the stealth fighter, F-117 at that time. And they found one and shot it down. Then they found another one and shot it down, and we quit because they beat us. They beat us with old technology. I don't know if that applies here, but I'm just suggesting that technology is not everything it's cracked up to be once it meets the war and meets the exigencies of that war and creative people on the other side. No advantage lasts very long, in other words.
Yeah, well, and especially as this war drags on, Larry, what does it tell you about how the U.S. is conducting this war now? Because for a long time, I've heard that the U.S. was largely standing off and avoiding the distance of or the capabilities of Iran's air defenses. Now, there are some who believe that they have to enter directly into Iran's airspace, making them more vulnerable. And then there's this report here that said that Iran possibly, now this isn't verified, this is just one source from Military Watch magazine, used the Majid heat-seeking missile system to take out the U.S. F-35. Not sure what that is. I don't know, Larry, if you know what it is, no. But it is an air defense system, I guess, that's indigenous to Iran. And a lot of Iranian sources, of course, have said that they were using their indigenous air defense systems to shoot this down. But what does it tell you about how the U.S. is fighting this war now as it drags on? I mean, we're entering the third week here.
Well, we've learned nothing from history. Yeah. The clearest, most Americans are raised with the notion that actually the use of air power brought an end to the war in the Pacific in World War II. That it was because of our relentless bombing of Japan, that the Japanese gave up. Well, the documents from the actual Japanese General Staff tell a different story. It is true, the United States, we started a relentless bombing campaign on the main islands in March of 1945. The first big one was the firebombing of Tokyo, killed over 100,000 Japanese. And we continued that bombing campaign through March, April, May, June, July. The atomic bomb was dropped first on Hiroshima on August 6th, and then on Nagasaki on August 9th. As Americans tell the story, as we were propagandized going through middle school and high school, that it was the use of the atomic bomb. That's what pushed the Japanese over the edge. But the reality was the Red Army, the Soviets, entered the war on August 8th, or depending on which side of the international date line you're on, August 8th or August 9th, and immediately attacked Japanese forces in Manchuria and decimated them. And the documents from the Japanese General Staff show that they had actually up to that point held out hopes that they could negotiate an independent surrender or deal with the Russians and split the Russians, the Soviets, off from the United States. Well, that failed. And it was the ground intervention by the Russians. That's what finally tipped it over. So here's the United States once again. We're gonna bomb them to the Stone Age. Yeah, good luck with that. We tried that in Vietnam. That didn't turn out so well. And we have up to this point dropped glide bombs or JASSMs from outside of Iranian territory. And to my knowledge, we're still not overflying Iranian territory because I think they do still continue to have air defense systems. So the SEAD missions, the secure enemy air defense hasn't, suppress enemy air defense hasn't worked. So now that's why you're getting all this public talk about ground forces in Iran. I mean, it is the level of incompetence now being displayed by the Trump administration separates it from any other president in our history for just gross negligence and incompetence, particularly when it comes to military affairs.
Yeah, well, Colonel Wilkerson, I wanted to also show because Iran, it's not only that they've taken down, I mean, I think reports are 16, 17 or so U.S. aircraft between drones and this F-35 and the KC-135 tanker.
Don't forget the F-15s.
Yeah,
it might have been the Kuwaitis, but
yeah, it might have been the Kuwaitis. It might have been the Iranians. Who knows at this point? But exactly. So, but they're not just. It's not just this. Colonel Wilkerson, Iran is hitting everywhere, and in particular, who's facing the most, I think, brutal attacks right now in retaliation is Israel. Israel, in the last 24, 48 hours, there are reports that Iran is just raining hell on Israel, that radars are only, or the alert systems are only going off sometimes as little as a couple of minutes before the missiles come down. I'll show a bit of imagery of what's going on, but talk about what is going on for Israel. There's even images coming out now of Haifa, the oil refinery, having been hit very hard in conjunction with Iran's attacks on energy infrastructure across the region. So maybe you can respond to this.
Let me say first, that author's name was Jim Bamford. I can't believe I forgot it, and he'll kill me if he listens to this. Everything I'm hearing from Israel indicates to me that one of the smartest things they did, if you will, and are doing, but it is becoming very onerous on their people, is building so many bunkers going underground. Because if they were above ground, say, for example, like probably most in Tehran were, those 10 million or so in Tehran, when the bombing commenced, there would be bodies everywhere. Probably a good 3 to 4% of the Israeli population would be dead or wounded. But the fact they have these bomb shelters, though, has its own limitations. I'm hearing that people are getting very restless. They're getting very irritated about having to stay in these bomb shelters or go to them. Now, they were running to them when the sirens went off, but as you said, the sirens aren't very effective anymore, so they're staying in the bomb shelters. They're not coming out. This can get very old after a very short time, especially for people who simply are not accustomed to it or had no idea whatsoever that Netanyahu would put them in this circumstance, that they would ever be in this sort of situation. So you have a morale problem, I think, now in Israel amongst the general electorate. You also have above ground tremendous destruction going on, so that when someone does come out, as I watched a woman come out recently on a smuggle video, and there was I don't remember if it was a New York Times reporter or CNN reporter that somehow managed to squirrel her way in there and had taken a cell phone picture, apparently. But there was video that accompanied it from someone else who was filming the thing. And you saw this woman come out of the bomb shelter, someone run over to her with a security garb on, try to grasp her and get her back in, and she resisted him. And the next thing you know, they disappeared. I don't know whether they were killed or not, but they disappeared in smoke and fire. So I think it's that sort of situation for Israel right now. And it's not going to get any better, because more and more you're not seeing anything going up and you're seeing lots coming down. The one most impressive one I watched was at least it was purported to be, and I assume it was because I've never seen anything like it, the Karam Shah 4, whatever, the one that comes in at 3 or 4 times the speed of sound and has this capability for a multiple entry, not like our MIRV, but it sounds like a MIRV system more than it does a cluster bomb. It lets 30 or 40 other projectiles go out. I don't know exactly how accurate they are, but if it's 30 or 40 and they have the detonative effect that I saw, then it's pretty formidable. And it's a huge square that gets penetrated and bombed. And it looked to me like it reminded me when I first saw the MLRS, the multiple launch rocket system that we had just put in the field at Grafenwehr, demonstrate what it could do to a column of Soviet tanks coming through the Fulda Gap or whatever. Nothing, I said to myself at that point, and to the two people who were on my left and right, could have lived through that. That was incredible. Well, that's what this thing is. So these things are hitting Israel with a regularity now.
Larry, what have you made of, especially the overall, every single day Iran is hitting Israel, every single day Iran is hitting across the region. And there are reports that it's not only not stopping, but that Iran is actually increasing slightly, if not ever so steadily, their volume of volleys again. What have you made of this, especially given the energy situation, which is causing panic all across the West?
Well, I'm very disturbed with the Iranians. I mean, obviously, they're not listening to Donald Trump, and they're not listening to Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, their missile capability has been wiped out. Don't they realize that? Yeah. I mean, for God's sake, wake up! You can't keep launching missiles you don't have. I'm sorry, but the absurdity of this, and we're seeing a replay of what we saw in Ukraine back in 2022. There were breathless reports on Western media every day. Oh, Russia's just days from running out of missiles. Meanwhile, the ones who are actually running out of missiles are the United States and Israel with respect to air defense missiles. They are being depleted, rapidly depleted. If not, I know in one particular area they were depleted last week.
Now, I didn't see any come up in this maybe 30-second episode. Not a single one.
Yeah. So Iran has they just launched their 68th wave of attacks. Right. That they're averaging 3.5 separate missile attacks per day. And each one of those attacks carry at least 20 missiles. So figure they're firing 60 to 100 missiles a day. Well, okay, so we're now day 21, 3 weeks in and starting the fourth week. So, averaging 100 a day, that's 2,100, right? So Iran obviously has a larger stash of missiles than the West had anticipated. But, I don't see how they could have made that mistake because, I was saying it last June, that Iran's storage, not only their production and their storage is underground, and they moved away from having to put out mobile launchers to launch. They figured out how to build silos that they could launch from underground and then reload from those silos without anything on the surface revealing actually where the missile is, making it very difficult for the United States to target those. And they've been very systematic, going after U.S. military bases, going after U.S. radar, going after aircraft and storage facilities, going after now, as their gas storage, as their gas production facility at South Pars was hit, they've turned around and taken out Qatar's. So now Qatar is, they can't just turn it back on. It's going to be done, for quite some time. And they are regularly hitting the infrastructure, both the military and critical economic infrastructure, such as the ports and the refinery and the airport in Israel. So, Iran's quite contempt. And meanwhile, They hold the control over the Strait of Hormuz. I read yesterday, I haven't seen it confirmed, but apparently even the Japanese, who are heavily dependent on oil coming out of the Persian Gulf, agreed to buy petroleum from Iran with Chinese yuan, with the Chinese currency. So while the new prime minister of Japan has run around Washington giving Donald Trump back rubs and foot massages and telling him what an incredible person he is, the Japanese practically are stiffened the U.S. petrodollar in favor of boosting China's control or effort to exert more control over the petrodollar. So it's really not going well for the United States.
No, it definitely isn't. And there was that horror. I don't have the video, but Takaichi sitting right next to Donald Trump when he responds to a question about why didn't he tell anyone about launching this war, and he goes, "Well, I want it to be a surprise. Japan knows all about surprises. Remember Pearl Harbor? I mean, this is just kind of the optics of all of this is looking quite bad. But Colonel Wilkerson, beyond the optics, to reinforce what Larry said and your reaction to it, here's a report from The Economist saying that the cost of replacing the first 4 days worth of munitions would be alone $20 billion to $26 billion. However, the problem is more to do with scarcity. U.S. has burned through 300 Tomahawk cruise missiles, and the Pentagon planned to just buy 57 new ones in the current fiscal year. No delivery of THAAD interceptors since 2023, and they haven't placed any orders for those. And a puny 39 interceptors are slated for delivery in 2027, 6 years after they're ordered. And Colonel Wilkerson, it's my understanding that not only has a lot of these interceptors been used, but a lot of their radars are completely destroyed as well all across the region. So your reaction to where the U.S. is, as it stands right now, the U.S. and Israel are militarily, in anything you want to respond to, Larry?
Well, there's several things that I think are true here. And one of the truths is that they're lying at the Pentagon. That's the first real problem they've got. And second, that many of these things, especially the multi-million dollar, some cases $200-300 million radars and other similar outfits that were destroyed quite smartly by Iran early on in various countries too, without, in most cases, doing too much damage to the surrounding other country outfits or material or people. In other words, they just took out the damn radars. Require minerals that China has about a 98% lock on, and I'm sure won't turn any loose for us, in order to build. So even if you could get the production line up, if you could put, double, triple shift on it, if you had the trained workers, if you could do all of that, you don't have the necessary ingredients to build it. Now, I understand they have a task force working right now around the clock. I guess that means 8 hours a day, 24 hours. I'd be surprised if Hegseth could get that work. Trying to find other sources or other, material they can supplement or exchange or substitute for the key material that China controls. And it's not just one particular item. It's about 3 or 4, as I understand it. One of them, though, gallium, I think it is, or however you say that, they have about a 97% lock on, 96, 97% lock. So you're not going to get that one for sure, probably. So they've got all these different impediments. And as I've said before, this business of making Tomahawks, for example, that's a crystal clear example if you want to look at it. Just Google it, and you can find the latest stats on what Tomahawk production is for the Navy, for the Air Force, for the Army even, because they have a version for them now. And you can see that it's ages and ages hence. Now, can they speed this up? Can they call RTX, Lockheed, others in and say, speed this up? Apparently, Trump's already done that in his meeting at Mar-a-Lago with these salivating defense contract CEOs. But you can only speed it up so much. And we're firing it fast enough to where their production rate, however good it might be, eventually is going to have a hard time keeping up. I don't see how they plan for this being a long war. That's my ultimate statement. They did not plan for it being even a month-long war. They planned for it being quick and over, and it isn't going to be. And on the other side of that coin, it may be a very long war.
Yeah, and Larry, to what Colonel Wilkerson was saying, just to pull this up because this is coming out now. According to Donald Trump, as of we're speaking, he's saying, and I can't believe this. He's saying that the U.S. could end military operations right now, but will continue so Iran can never rebuild. He's saying that Israel and the U.S. share similar goals in this war, and that it's not acceptable to end right now because if the U.S. does, Iran will be able to rebuild at some point in the near future or in the future, and he wants to make sure that never happens. But Colonel Wilkerson just laid out some huge limitations. And so your reaction to this, especially in lieu, and I'm going to pull up the reports, Larry, that there's multiple fronts that the U.S. military is trying to open. They're sending helicopters and other, aircraft to try to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And they're rushing thousands of Marines now to the Middle East in order to do something. We don't really know quite what. There's conflicting reports. So your reaction to all of this?
Tell him how they're rushing them.
Yeah, how are they rushing them?
Yeah.
How are they rushing these Marines anyway?
So look, I agreed with everything Colonel Wilkerson said. So let's step back and try to figure out what in the world are Trump and Netanyahu trying to do. So they're openly talking about putting U.S. troops on the ground in Iran. In previous U.S., let's call them military expeditions, such as the invasion of Normandy on D-Day, we weren't announcing that we were going to be landing there. Well, if anything, we did a deception operation to make the Germans think we were going to land up at Pas-de-Calais, up to the north. And Patton constructed a whole mythical army that, and with message traffic and everything, to convince the Germans of that, so that we would get some advantage being able to land in Normandy. So I can't rule out the possibility that all of this talk about sending the Marines is just, it's a charade. It's a deception operation. So I put that as one possibility, but that means we're preparing to try to do something else. And that something else that's been talked about is, it's an exercise I worked on 20 years ago, where you put Delta Force into Iran to try to capture one of the uranium storage locations and take custody of it. And I sure hope to God that we're not trying to do that, because the lesson from that exercise, and nothing's changed in the intervening 20 years, is don't do it. It's too many things to go wrong. And, I know one of my buddies, he was a young ranger and doing patrol on the hostage rescue attempt. When the helicopter crashed into the C-130 out in the deserts of Iran back in 1980. Yeah, my buddy Mike, who was then a ranger and then later went on to become a Delta sniper, he was there. We just, good intention, but we sort of screwed the goat in that process. So now let's look. If it's not a deception operation, and they're genuinely talking about sending, so far I've heard two different MEUs, the Marine Expeditionary Unit. A MEU consists of 2,200 Marines. So one supposedly coming out of Okinawa, the other one's coming out of San Diego. Well, the one that comes out of Okinawa, it's going to take about 2 weeks for that unit to arrive on scene. So let's put 2 weeks from today, we're going to be in April. Likewise, from San Diego, and I was surprised by this. I had thought that maybe the easiest way, San Diego, just start sailing west. No, they go down through the Panama Canal, sail across the Atlantic, go through the Mediterranean into the Suez Canal, then down through the Red Sea. Wow. And then they'll get on station to do whatever. Well, The Chinese know that, the Russians know that, and I'm sure they're sharing that with the Iranians. If there is actually that group of Marines and being sailing that route, and it is learned that in fact the United States is serious about trying to put them ashore, then I wouldn't be surprised to see that ship sunk in the Red Sea before it even has a chance to get on station. Plus, it's going to take about 17 to 19 days to get there. So again, so I've got all these breathless news reports about, oh, they're sending troops. They're not getting there anytime soon, folks. So don't hold your breath. We don't have the Star Trek transportation capabilities. We'll move you from instantly. Beam me up, Scotty.
Yeah.
No, there's
Turn
none
on
of
warp speed. No.
yeah, none of that going on. But if they genuinely are planning to try to use these guys militarily, so we're talking maximum 4,400 Marines, what they've announced. Well, compare that to the D-Day operations on the coast, Normandy coast. That involved 165,000 troops that landed, not counting the paratroopers that had gone in already earlier in the night that were inland. And the U.S. was going up against defended positions, there are defended positions all along that Strait of Hormuz, which that beach area that we attacked on D-Day was 50 miles from north to south. Strait of Hormuz is more than 100 miles north to south. So we did 165,000 troops and had trouble establishing a beachhead. And so now we're going to send 4,400 up against defended positions, and they're going to somehow magically make the Iranians back down. This is madness, absolute madness.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Colonel. Hold on.
Huge demonstration yesterday outside of Sana'a. The Houthis are up in arms now. They're ready to go again. I was wondering when they were going to enter the fray. I knew they probably would sooner or later, but apparently they've made a decision, and this was sort of the ceremonial announcement of that decision. So I'm not sure I'd want to be passing through the Red Sea.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The Houthis, Ansar Allah, Colonel Wilkerson, they've also said that if the Gulf states try to use their air interceptors to take down missiles heading toward Israel, that they are going to begin fighting. It seems like they're itching, especially to fight with, especially to get back into the fight with Saudi Arabia, which
I'm
of
sure.
course, which of course they have a history around there to settle a bit. But
there's a vendetta with that.
Yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't want to. But Colonel Wilkerson, your reaction to this, because there's also talk of Karg Island. There's a talk of maybe that's going to be the operation that they're going to. That there's going to be these Marines and U.S. forces that are sent there to occupy the oil crown jewel, or energy crown jewel, as the U.S. mainstream media is calling it.
The Forbidden Island is what the Persian poet called it, or the lost pearl, the lost pearl of the Persian Gulf, or something like that. The only way that I could see that would be feasible, and Larry and I talked about this with Nima earlier, would be to fly Marines in Ospreys, or a combination of Ospreys and their MH version of the Black Hawk, and that would be really ripe for total destruction of that air element if the Iranians were at least, let's put it this way, in range, right missiles, and timing. You would be annihilated. You wouldn't even be able to get on the ground, probably. And if you did get on the ground, you'd be annihilated right afterwards. So I can't, we did this all the time at the Amphibious Warfare School, and we used the AWS in the War College and then the Command and Staff College to do demonstrative things when we were talking about big amphibious ops. One of the things you might want to keep in mind is about 50% of even the Corps at that time but I'd say far more percentage in the other services, and in the joint community above all the services would tell you amphibious operations have seen their day. They are not going to ever occur again because if they do, everyone involved in the amphibious operation itself is going to die. And maybe some of the ships supporting it are going to die too. And this is all because of what we've seen so demonstrably shown us in Ukraine and now beginning to be shown us in this war. Missiles dominate. Drones dominate. And if you had sufficient quantities, accurate enough and deadly enough, and the Iranians have proven 10 times over they do, you can devastate anyone trying this more or less traditional means, however the Marines may cling to it. And a good comment on that is how the Navy has refused to fund many of their desires for new amphibious bottoms and such. In fact, these are what's left. This is really what's left. It's just not a manner of warfare that I'd be particularly not in these circumstances. Now, if you're going ashore in a third world, fourth world, pardon that phrase, but we used to use it all the time, country with not much of a military, and they've got a nice sandy beach you can rotate up on, like they do at San Diego when they practice, or Southern California. Yeah, okay, but that's passé. That's gone, unless you are going up against a fourth, fifth, sixth-rate power, militarily speaking. Iran's not that now. They've proven it. They've substantiated it. It may be in a niche way, but that niche happens to be battlefield dominant right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you would do this without getting a lot of people killed, mostly Marines.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was wondering about, Larry. You know, Responsible Statecraft wrote this in reaction to this news days ago, and now there's more reports that this is a serious planning going on, if we can call it that, in the Trump administration. But Harrison Mann, who's a former Army major, he said seizing Iran's crown jewel would be a suicide mission, an operation to hold Tehran's oil hostage by taking over Karg Island would end up delivering the regime hostages of its own, referring to those who would be participating in the operation. Larry, your assessment of this as well, if you can add.
Well, again, we're not learning anything from history. We saw in the Black Sea, both the Russians and Ukrainians had a learning experience with this outcrop of rock in the middle of the Black Sea called Snake Island. Mm-hmm. So early on, the Russians were there. The Ukrainians attacked it. The Russians held for a while, and then they withdrew. The Ukrainians climbed on board, and then they ended up abandoning the rock because, you know, you could shell it all day long from naval gunfire and drones and missiles and glide bombs. And there, you know, even if you were hiding out in a bunker on the island, you know, what are you going to do? So this whole fantasy about taking Karg Island, United States is suffering a multiple personality disorder. On the one hand, you've got those advocating, we got to shut it down because that's going to cripple Iran's ability to export oil. But then now you got Scott Bessent saying, oh, no, we need to lift the sanctions on Iran so Iran can ship oil to keep the oil supplies up so we don't crush the world. Like, okay, guys, which is it? You want to cripple Iran by shutting down its oil, and if you do that, Iran vowed, okay, we'll shut down everybody else. And so you will permanently take 20%, 25% of the world petroleum off the market right away. Boom. And it won't be back anytime soon. Particularly given it's going to take any U.S. Marines that are headed there 2+ weeks to get there now. So this is, the United States is setting up. They can't figure out what they want to do with a ground mission. And again, let's go back to history. Iraq tried for 8 years to invade and take territory in Iran, and failed, and lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the process. The United States thinks with its puny little force, and I don't care even if this if all the news about the Marines moving or the 82nd Airborne moving, if these are all intended as deceptions and they're going to actually try to go something with an even smaller force, this ain't Hollywood. You know, the SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force can be the stars of the show in a Hollywood movie, but, you know, they're not going to run off with Iran's nuclear capability. You know, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, Colonel Wilkerson, you know, any further comment on this? I mean, I think that, you know, we're looking at a major crisis on the U.S. side that the Trump administration seems to be whistling by. And we haven't even discussed the energy part of this, because oil prices are absolutely skyrocketing. What Iran did to just Qatar energy alone, that critical hub, they're saying months, according to the Western mainstream media, for it to be operable at all, and fully operable years. So that's a major hit. And Bloomberg is saying that no matter what happens in this war, it could end tomorrow. It'll take months, if not years, to get back. And it's not going to end tomorrow. So your reaction to the economic side of this and how it relates to the military developments that we're seeing?
Well, I saw this up close and personal in a very vivid way. I think I've spoken about this before, in something called a petroleum disruption exercise we ran at the new Ritz-Carlton in the financial district of Beijing in February 2009. We had we had all of what we would call the peer and near peer powers there. We had MARAD there. We had Lloyd's of London. We had AIG. We had the U.S. Shippers Group. I forget what you call it, but it's all the major shipping companies in the world, chaired at that time by the U.S. We had all manner of expertise there in maritime affairs and in oil and gas. And we just did two things. We had about a week exercise. We did two things. We took down a tanker in the Strait of Malacca. We got everybody interested in the techniques of the exercise and so forth through that rendition. We did a little bit of damage. We got the five-power defense agreement in there. It was inadequate. We got the United States Navy in there. And incidentally, at this particular time, and I go back to this time for when I want to talk about better times, the Chinese actually agreed that the United States Navy, in addition were some of theirs and maybe some Russians and others, but the United States Navy would lead it, would be, because it was the preeminent sea force, the most able to dampen down tensions and to bring the markets back in shape. Even 2 or 3 days in, they were showing signs of no shippers would ship that way, and that's a lot of shipping. No insurers would insure and so forth. The minute the U.S. Navy got on scene in force and others joined them, like the five-power defense agreement navies, everything calmed down. And so, you know, we had an interlude there of just discussing what had happened and so forth. Then the next iteration was we took down Ras Tanura. 8 million barrels per day production capacity at that time. That was at that time Saudi Arabia's most prolific port. Compare it to Carg Island today, for example, 10, 12 tankers loading simultaneously, done and gone in a day. Huge output. Wow. Shippers wouldn't ship, insurers wouldn't insure. Nobody was getting any oil, and $300 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate, and Brent crude was right behind it. Those were the only two real meaningful benchmarks at the time. We had to go into, and we did go into a long, and Ambassador Chaz Freeman can tell you all about it. He was the only one there that spoke Mandarin on our side, so he could understand the Chinese deliberations on the other side of the table. We had to go through an enormous amount of discussion. The Chinese delegation, I've never seen this happen in a war game, in a simulation before. They actually raised their hand and asked if they could go back to their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we knew some of them were intel plants in the exercise. We had similar people there. They asked if they could go back because they said this decision was so monumental that they had to have in a war game. They had to have permission to make the decision they were going to make. And they did, and they came back, and we made the decision. And I can't remember the total decision, but basically what we did was something the world would have thought never could be done. We took the world's oil supplies and redistributed them all across the face of the globe. We sent North Slope Alaskan oil, for example, to Korea for the first time. We sent, one of the other incredible moves was we sent a huge load going to China instead up to Japan and Korea, because they really hurt. But Japan, for example, 100% of its petroleum comes from overseas. So to say that those were better times is to say the truth. They were better times. We actually made some good decisions, and I have no doubt that that was fairly realistic, that we could deal with a critical global situation like that at that time, and would have. Not today. Not today, because at root, what we're doing here, Donald Trump has no conception of what I'm going to say. Neither does Pete Hegseth. I don't think Vance does either, although Peter Thiel might have given him some insights. The people behind this administration, and they're not all Americans, the people behind the money, behind the American empire, want China taking down. That's what this real purpose of this war in Iran is for this country. That's why we're waging this war. I don't think the president knows that. But that's really, it has nothing to do with Iran's nuclear capability. It has everything to do with the Southern Base Road Initiative, arguably the most dangerous one of all, is coming through Iran and going up into the belly of the Caucasus. And once that's operational and the other three are added to it, the northern one, the central one, and the southern one in Russia, which is really just a remake of the Trans-Siberian Railroad, in conjunction with Russia, mind you. This is all happening. All these things are going to debouch into Europe. And that's the new world economy. And we've taken the southern one, which to us we think is the most dangerous, and we've taken it on in this war. And that's who's behind this. That's who is really backing this conflict, which is why I think it's going to be long and hard. And Iran doesn't even know. I'm not even sure Bibi knows. Bibi's plugged into the world's intelligence, so maybe he does know. But I think that's the real reason behind this conflict. And that's the reason I don't think it's going to be over anytime soon.
Yeah, and then that begs the question, Larry, what do we make of the desperation that we're seeing on especially both sides, all sides of the aggressor parties, especially the U.S. and Israel? I don't know if you saw this, Larry. This was Donald Trump today saying, without the U.S., NATO is a paper tiger, which is always quite funny whenever this happens, because I think, okay, you're calling yourself a paper tiger. I guess they didn't want to join the fight to stop a nuclear-powered Iran. Now that the fight is militarily won with very little danger for them, they complain about high oil prices they're forced to pay, but don't want to help open the Strait of Hormuz, a simple military maneuver that's a single reason for the high prices. So easy for them to do, so little risk. Cowards, we will remember. Now, Malcolm Nance, who I despise, he's a
Yes.
you know
he's a fraud.
U.S. intel asset, but even he is saying you can't get to Karg Island without transiting the Strait of Hormuz. He is sounding the alarm that this is going to end in disaster. And I just want to show this for good measure as we begin to get your final comments here. This is a situation in Israel. Some people in the audience were asking, where are Israeli troops? Why aren't they being deployed? Why can't they do some of this? And here's a situation in Israel. You have everyone, you have WhatsApp, according to Israeli sources, 4 alerts were heard in a 90-minute span, filled with people having breakdowns after not sleeping for 2 weeks. So Iranian missile fire is definitely keeping them very busy and incredibly stressed. But Larry, what do you make of this? It's the desperation. You just see it. Donald Trump posts it. He posts the desperation. This is not something I'm making up. Your reaction to this, given everything that Colonel Wilkerson was saying, that this is going to be a long war, but yeah, it'll be a long, painful one. It seems like.
Yeah. Well, let me go back and remind you of what Donald Trump said at the State of the Union apologize to Colonel Wilkerson. He's going to have to hear this again. He heard it earlier with Nima. But this is what Trump was bragging about in terms of his major accomplishments during his first year in office. He said, quote, and this was 4 days before the start of the war, before we illegally attacked Iran on February 28th. On February 24th, he said, gasoline, which reached a peak of over $6 a gallon in some states under my predecessor, it was quite honestly a disaster, is now below $2.30 a gallon in most states, and in some places $1.99 a gallon. And when I visited the great state of Iowa just a few weeks ago, I even saw $1.85 a gallon for gasoline, the lowest in 4 years and fallen fast. Well, now it's rising like a rocket, like an Iranian rocket headed for a U.S. military base in Qatar. I know down in my neck of the woods, gasoline has surged over $1 a gallon in the past 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So, and I haven't checked it today. I've gotten in the habit now. I go drive to the gas station just to see the price going up. And people are shaking their head. So Trump's got a real big political problem on his hand, and that's one of the reasons you see this desperation, because they were told, he was told by the Israelis, by the Zionists, that this is a piece of cake. We got this wired inside. We got a guy already at the higher levels in the IRGC. All we got to do is kill these people. The regime's going to collapse. The people are going to rise up and protest, and we'll have control of Iran 2 weeks max. 2 weeks max. Well, now we're going into week 4, and no end in sight. So it is. That's why they're desperate, and you've seen also a change in the rhetoric in Russia. I mean, in Iran. Excuse me, Israel. Too many eyes. Alistair Crook's wife, Aisling, she reads all the Hebrew language press. So a lot of times what happens in Israel, they'll put out one story in English, but they tell another story in Hebrew. They think, those Americans, they don't understand Hebrew. So here's the deal. The Israelis went from talking about victory and defeat of Iran to now there's like, okay, we sort of achieved our objectives, and we got maybe some more reasonable people in leadership positions, so we may need to bring this to an end. And that's what I took away from Bibi Netanyahu's press conference yesterday, where he specifically said that he said, after 20 days, I can tell you, Iran today has no ability to enrich uranium and no ability to produce ballistic missiles. So we'll just declare victory and go home. That's what saying that they no longer can enrich uranium and no longer produce ballistic missiles. What's the logical conclusion in the war? So that's where you're seeing the desperation, I think, on the part of both Israel and the U.S.
Yeah, and Danny, this time, Iran's not going to stop.
Yeah,
I mean they can stop if they want to. Israel can stop. I don't think Iran's going to stop.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Colonel Wilkerson. We had a couple of questions from the audience. Maybe you two can answer quickly before we head out of here. We had one question: how about Israel and U.S. surrendering unconditionally? What are the odds, and why is naval artillery bombardment not being used? I think these are two good questions, given what you just said there, Colonel Wilkerson. Iran has a choice here, and they've said, I mean, they're being very open about it. They're saying that they are not going to necessarily stop unless they have particular demands met. So Colonel Wilkerson, you, and then Larry.
Well, the one question I can tell you about naval bombardment, unless you've got some shells that'll extend to fire about 1,000 kilometers, you're not going to get naval bombardment because you're going to get your ship destroyed. You can't get close enough. You couldn't even get anywhere near. Why do the carriers hang back 1,300 nautical miles? Because they know Iran has missiles that can, if you hit Lincoln or Ford or any other carrier for that matter, if you hit the amphibious bottom that is called a carrier but isn't really, with Khorram Shah, it's gone. It's finished. It's done. It's toast. It's on the bottom. It's in Davy Jones' locker. And sad to say, so were probably most of the 5,000 sailors, because this is catastrophic sinking that happens when you get hit with a high velocity missile like that. We were really worried about it way long time ago in implementing our O plan in the Pacific against the Russians, because they were going to shoot sea skimmers, submarine torpedoes that are hugely effective, and they were going to shoot high velocity missiles, and they were going to shoot missiles in the interim. So you were going to get 3 classes of missiles coming in, one diving right straight down on you. And this was an early version, if you will, of Oreshnik. And you were going to get submarines that shot torpedoes that would come up under you and break you in half, and your stern and bow would go down almost simultaneously with all hands on board. You want to see some of that? Look at torpedoes we fired from ships like boats like Tang and Wahoo against the Japanese, again in the East China Sea, in the Formosa Straits, and they went down with all hands on board and all cargo on board. And you can read the skipper's reports. 3 minutes from 6 torpedoes hitting her bow, midships, and stern. 3 minutes down, the whole ship, everything down. They didn't have to surface and pick up survivors. One time Tang did and picked up a single survivor and took him all the way back to Pearl. That was the only one. That's the devastation we're talking about. That was 1944. It's much worse today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Larry, final word here.
Yeah, no, I agree with Colonel Wilkerson. Look, you know, you can't get in. If you get in close to the coast, they're done. They're toast. So what we've realized is the limits of naval power, as well as limits of air power.
Yeah, definitely. Without further ado, everyone, we are going to head out here. Be sure to hit the like button. That helps keep the stream boosted as time goes on after we're done, and that helps Larry and Colonel Wilkerson get their message out further. Larry's blog is in the video description, sonar21.com. All the places to support this channel are there as well. I want to thank all the people who gave super chats and new members. Thanks so much for that. And I'm actually going away for a little bit, but I will be trying to do some short morning programs to keep the updates going. But be on the lookout for that. And without further ado, everyone, take care, and I'll see you on the next show.
Bye-bye.
Take care.